Good morning to you. Good morning, Melinda. Are you ready? If you're getting your coffee, come on in. There are tables awaiting you, especially up front. All right, so we are going to get started this morning because I like to stay on time. And Jessica tells me to. All right, so welcome back to day 2 of the Allied Health Professionals meeting. Thank you so much for everyone who's joining us in person and for all of you joining us virtually. My name is Sarah Feldman. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. If you missed it yesterday, we had some fantastic presentations. They were recorded, so they will be available as soon as they are ready. I would just ask the speakers and people asking questions just to speak slowly, to remember that not everyone in the room speaks English as their first language. And then, to start off, I'd love to welcome up Melinda Kavanaugh for What Does Sleep Have to Do with It? Experiences of Young Carers in ALS M&D.
Well, good morning. I'm actually surprised to see so many folks here this morning at bright and early 8 a.m. I'm surprised to see myself here bright and early at 8 a.m. Yes, so how apropos that we get to speak about sleep. And my first slide is always a fun one. How well did everybody sleep last night? Everybody getting nice, good, long night's sleep? Or are we all a little jet lagged? Are we all still a little tired trying to figure out where we are and who we are and what's going on? I'm going to talk today, Melinda Kavanaugh, Professor of Social Work at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee in the United States. And I'm going to talk today about 2 projects that really have built off a lot of work that I've been doing over the years, looking at how caregiving influences or has some sort of impact on the well-being of children and youth. And so when I say children and youth, I'm looking at individuals who are under the age of around 18 or 19. So we are looking at young children who are caregivers and how caregiving influences their well-being. So today we're going to talk about sleep. So sleep impacts everything that we do, right? It has everything to do with our self-perception, our mental health, our physical health, our social support, our school performance and attendance, our conference performance and attendance. It has to do with everything, and it is so, so critical to our overall functioning. But when we think about youth and adolescence, sleep is incredibly important. It is important for their developmental trajectory. It is important for their building their own mental health and well-being. It's particularly important as we look at the role of sleep and learning in children's school performance and attendance, right? So young children need lots of sleep, but as they go into adolescence, they need the most sleep. Sometimes the largest amount of sleep that we need developmentally is found in our later teens and early adulthood. But what we don't understand a lot about is how sleep influences the health and well-being of these children and youth when they're also providing care. We know that in the adult population, there has been research looking at how sleep influences the quality of care and the quality of life for adult caregivers who are up at night, who are doing very complex tasks. Well, what we do know from the research that both myself and many of my colleagues around the world have found is that children and youth are deeply involved in care. And this is bathing, feeding, toileting, transferring, watching throughout the day and into the evening. So we're putting the picture together and saying, we know that sleep is critical. We know that children and youth are deeply involved in care, but what we don't have a good enough understanding of is how sleep is influencing their well-being being a caregiver. So a couple of years ago, as part of a grant that my colleagues and I received through the NIH, through the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeastern Wisconsin, we did a small feasibility study just to see, can we even get this kind of information from children and youth? So we had them wear an actigraphy device, something akin to an Apple Watch, not an Apple Watch, but something, in the words of the children, less cool. So it was a little clunky, but they wore it, and what we really wanted to see is, will children wear these things? Will we be able to track motion at a very, very sensitive level? And we found that they in fact would, and they did. And we found a really significant difference in not only the disruption of sleep across days, but the depth and the robustness of sleep between children and youth who are caregivers for a family member living with ALS and MND, and their non-caregiving counterparts. So that was the first kind of, okay, all right, we've got some basic information and we're seeing that there actually is something going on with these caregiving youth, that there is some disruption happening and there is something significantly different between them and their non-caregiving counterparts. How did I do that? Okay. All right, there we go. Woo! So our next study, we received a grant through the ALS Association to build out on that. And what we wanted to see is, was there something about that group? And what else was going on? Was there something happening around support and worry? We wanted to understand those concepts a little bit better because the first study was very brief and very hyper-focused just on sleep. And so what we did is we created an app for phone users, and they could use it on either an iOS or an Android. And the app asked them at the moment of care to tell us on a sliding scale, they could just slide their finger across from 0 to 100, a series of questions around support, around worry. We also had a pre-survey to where they filled out several of the PROMIS measures, which are measures that looked at sleep, that asked about quality of life, that asked about social support, that asked about school performance and attendance. So we had some pre-survey data, and then we did it again at the end of 7 days. So over those 7 days, a different group of youth also wore the same actigraphy device. They completed the EMA, which is the Ecological Momentary Assessment Protocol that my colleague at the University of California, Merced, does a lot of work around, and it's really, it's a really powerful way to capture something in the moment of whatever it is you're doing, right? So we have our phone, you open the app, and then in that moment of care, you can tell us what care you're doing and how you feel about that care at that moment. So we had 21 youth in this next level of study. We had 12 caregivers and 9 non-caregivers. They ranged in age from 12 to 19. They wore the device for 7 days. We had a total of 260 assessments from the 21 youth. So they did assessments at 3 time points, set time points throughout the day, but then they also had these care moments, and these care moments are what I'm going to spend a little bit more time on today. There's a tremendous amount of data that you can collect using this type of method, and it's very easy. Again, everybody has their phone 24/7 with them, so particularly kids. So they were not burdened in any way, shape, or form. So at these care assessments, we had 3 very specific questions we wanted them to answer for us. Worry. So we were wanting to know, so a lot of the previous literature helps us understand that children and youth do worry about the person that they're providing care for, even not in that care moment, right? And adult caregivers, absolutely. You're kind of preoccupied, you're thinking about care, you're wondering how they're doing and what's going on. Then we wanted to understand perceived resources. And when I say resources, I mean personal resources. So we wanted to know how they felt that they had what they needed as an individual, as a person, to provide care. And the reason why we asked that is so much of our earlier research really hinted at, and the qualitative data helped us explore, that children and youth feel a sense of responsibility. And they feel a sense of, I can do this. I have this, I know what's going on. And we wanted to know if that was actually happening in the moment of care as well. And then lastly, we wanted to understand support. Do they have outside support? And this is support, again, outside of themselves. So we're interested in the worry piece, that perseveration worry. We're interested in, I've got this, I have the own personal resources, and then we're interested in the external support. So I wanted to just highlight a little bit about the caregiving that we did capture. So you'll see that at any point in time, they're doing all types of care. Now, the most common type of care is what we kind of consolidated into basic care. And this is where bathing, feeding, and toileting comes into play. Then we have emotional care. That is where they're attending to the emotional well-being. They're having discussions around either an external kind of show of emotion of their loved one. Then housekeeping and hygiene. So the difference between hygiene and basic care, we broke out hygiene to specifically be around toothbrushing. So I know we didn't label it in the best way, but we were trying to figure out how to split that up, because basic care absorbed the rest of those kind of bathing and toileting care tasks. Then you'll see that the frequency of tasks, so primarily they're just doing one task at a time, so about 67%. But if you look down, this is at any given moment, right? So at any given moment, the majority of youth are doing one care task. But we see that they're also around 15% are doing two tasks. Some are doing three. Now, all the way at the bottom, you'll see that there are youth who reported at any given moment doing 6 tasks at a time. Now, it wasn't the largest sample, but the fact that there's any child or youth out there doing 6 tasks at a time should make us just pause for a moment. So accumulated sleep, worry, resources, and support. So the first one is, I'll go over this graph with you. So to the left there, that is the hours of sleep. Right? So then the bottom, we'll see we have low, moderate, and high worry. So they were able to, across this sliding scale, tell us the level of worry. So what we found is the high level of worry, the more worry they reported, the less sleep. Right? So they're kind of perseverating over their worry, and we're looking at their actigraphy, and their sleep is, the less sleep they have, the more worry. Then we look at resources, and as a reminder, this is their personal resources. This is how they feel that they have within themselves to provide care. So you'll see that the more resources they felt, the more they felt, I got this, I could do this, their sleep was actually affected. They were sleeping less the more they really felt like they could do it themselves, right? The opposite is when they felt they had external support. The more external support they had, the more sleep they got, right? This isn't necessarily rocket science, but it's good to see it kind of displayed this way, because it helps us, again, kind of fill in the picture of what's happening with these children and youth. So when they feel they've got it, they are being these strong, independent individuals, their sleep's affected. But when outside support is provided, when they feel they have people helping them, that's when their sleep improves, right? But what we also know is that caregiving does not end when they're not caregiving. So one of those questions again, are you worried about not being there to provide care if they need it? So the first way we looked at that is to try to kind of tease out this information. And we looked at, is there a relationship between worry and off to the side, you'll see those are that sliding scale, right? So that's that sliding scale of emotions. And what we found is that there's an absolute correlation between, not shocking, high levels of worry and negative emotions. And this is where we think about anxiety and depression. Right? Those things are going hand in hand, not in the moment of care. So this is when they are not providing care. Same thing with stress. These are children who are not in the moment of care, but they're letting us know that they are still worried and they have high levels of stress. So even in the absence of care, going about their everyday business, now remember we had 3 time points of set survey data. Right? Then in the moment of care, they could tell us how they felt. So these are times when they're not providing care, but they're still telling us that they're worried and stressed. So what does all of this mean, right? At 8 a.m., woo! Sleep is critical. And it is absolutely affected by several issues. Even when they feel they have the resources, they're still worrying. They're sleeping less. And they often are not asking for help because, again, they feel they have the resources, right? Outside support is so, so critical. And this was some of my very earliest research many, many years ago was asking children and youth, what do you need to help? What do you need? What can people do to help you? And right away, these issues of outside support came just bombarding in the research. And that's why the other day I talked about the Y-Care program, which is a program that gives children support and skills to provide care. So our takeaway, and I am a social worker and I am a social work professor, so I'm always thinking about the application. Where are our intervention points? What can we do to apply this? And I see you. So young carers, they grow up faster, they take on a lot of responsibility, but they don't always ask for help. Intervention point. Where can we offer help? How can we intervene without having them come to us? They may feel like they can handle it, but their sleep is affected. When they have support, they worry less and sleep better. Intervention point. Let's provide support there. But they still worry, even when they aren't providing care. More worry, less sleep, intervention point. So let's think about this issue of children and youth as caregivers as opportunity to really expand what we do and don't know and conceptualize what caregiving means and how we can expand it to include children and youth, but also expand it to say, how can we help them and how can we support them without kind of pathologizing, which is what often happens with children and youth. I'll leave you with a quote. I felt like a 40-year-old even when I was a teenager. Relying on assumed internal resources combined with high levels of worry and care responsibilities ages our young carers faster. So this is a young adult who came back and did some survey, some interviews with me much later after being a young carer, and this is how they responded. So next steps, we have an expansion study looking at this in Alzheimer's and related dementia with my colleagues at the Medical College of Wisconsin, looking at a larger study in that population. Thank you for our funders. Thank you to my wonderful research team. And absolutely thank you for all the children and youth who are so kind and wear that big, clunky, ugly actigraphy device. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have time for questions. There's one up front, there's one here. Do we have microphones?
I love it. Everybody.
So 40 years old is old, Melinda? Is that what you're saying?
Dude, you know I had to bite my tongue when they said that. I was like, really? Good luck. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The concept of children and youth. So it's been changing the concept. You quoted until 21, and it seems that, at least from insurance purposes in America, children are under insurance until 26. So it's almost like the young ones, the age is changing. Are you planning research moving into older?
Yeah, so actually they were only up to 19, but there were 21 in the study. So so the age cutoff for this was 19. But absolutely, I have a couple of different colleagues in different parts of the US where we're building projects looking at, because what's missing in the data is anything longitudinal. So this is worldwide young care data. We don't have good longitudinal data that says what happens after 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years. And so we are looking at that kind of young adult or youngish adult, kind of between 20 and 26, to get a better sense of what's happening there. We do know that from some anecdotal and from some smaller qualitative studies, that age group, they're putting off things like going to college, things like having children, getting married, because of their care responsibilities that are now extending into their own adulthood. That's a great question.
Thank you for answering the second one.
Oh, did I just intuit it?
Gunjan has a question up front here.
Thank you. For me, it's kind of, we are breaking the human rights of the children to force them to help and delay their childhood and so on. So we must all fight for the right of children to be children. Don't you agree?
I do agree, and it's probably the most complex question, and I get it asked all the time. By no means am I a proponent of forcing children to do anything. The majority of children in my research are often in the role of caregiver for economic reasons, right? Particularly in the United States, the way healthcare is structured, and our lack of consistent and accessible healthcare and social care. So what we end up with is, this kind of army, if you will, of children and youth who are participating in care, not in a forced way, but because a family need. There's also a very large cultural piece at play, and I'm going to call out Haley, who is one of my South African colleagues. In a lot of the work that we've done in South Africa, it's hugely cultural, and there's a level of expectation. I will say one more thing really quickly. Very few youth that I've interviewed, and I've now interviewed, I'm not sure, maybe close to 1,000 over the years, very few say that they don't enjoy it or that they get some sort of negative response from it. There is a huge positive piece here. They do want to help. They feel a sense of positivity and enjoyment almost. But the thing is with any care, we can hold that in the same space that we hold our stress and our burden and our anxiety. Mm-hmm. So these are not things that happen. These are not mutually exclusive. So it's a great question, Gunjan. Yes.
We have time for one more online question.
Kathy's. Yeah, Kathy. Oh.
I've got a question here from Kevin Robinson at Niels.
Hi, Kevin.
It's two-part. So first, was there any indication that the app itself was beneficial as sort of external support? And then more specifically, did having the app available to tell how they feel help?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Kevin. I don't know to the first question, like what, do we have some sort of evidence that it was useful? That I do not know. I would guess that it might be because it could have been perceived as someone acknowledging them. That's what we also run into in this research, is that children and youth aren't acknowledged for what they do. And so it could be that was playing a role there. But I love that question. I already lost the second question. I didn't sleep well last
more
night.
Specifically, did having the app available to tell how they feel help?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Kathy is frantically waving in the corner.
All right, Kathy.
I know. I'm sorry.
Just because Melinda was up first at 8
Because
o'clock.
I had to go
will I allow her
first.
one more question.
Thank you. It's not a question, it's a comment from my colleague Yohei, who flew 13,000 kilometers to be with us. So I wanted to make sure that
Yes.
this got into the record. It says, thank you very much for the wonderful performance. It was very fulfilling content that I would like to share with my company's employees in Japan. Thank you.
I would be absolutely honored to do so. So I will come find you, Yohei. Absolutely. I think I'm done now.
Yes. Thank you so much, Melinda. That was awesome. Next will be a virtual presentation from, wait a minute, there's words here. Cassandra Adams and Rebecca Alver for their presentation After the Loss of a Loved One with ALS, What's Next?
I'm Cassie Adams, Care Services Director for ALS Northwest, and today I'll be joined in presenting with Rebecca Albert, Bereavement Services Coordinator. We are so excited to be joining everyone for the International Alliance of ALS MND Associations Allied Professionals Forum. Today we'll be discussing our organization's journey in providing grief and bereavement supports to the ALS community. First off, I have nothing to disclose. The goal of our presentation today is to share how ALS Northwest identified a need for enhanced bereavement support, the areas of expansion and support that we've added on in terms of our program, and our continued next step. ALS Northwest is dedicated to improving the quality of life for people living with ALS. Throughout our 24-year history, we have developed, refined, and expanded our services based on the premise that everyone has the right to define what quality of life means to them. From the beginning, ALS Northwest has developed services and practical support tools to help people with ALS live with the disease. Recognizing that ALS is a progressive disease with no cure, our board and our staff have prioritized the expansion of bereavement services as part of our commitment to service people living with ALS, their caregivers, and other family members. Prior to the expansion, what we did offer individuals in the community was care coordination throughout all regions of our entire state of Oregon and Southwest Washington. And that could look like engagement in home visits, providing resources and support, engaging in support groups, and partnering with multidisciplinary ALS centers. Those dedicated care services staff would often support people from the moment of their diagnosis up until their death. But most of our services stopped at the passing of that person living with ALS. We did have some ongoing grief and bereavement support services, but they were pretty minimal. So we really looked at what next? What can we do as a community to support people living with ALS and their families after their death? For many years, the ALS community has communicated a need for increases in bereavement and grief support. And from the beginning, ALS Northwest has really been all about supporting those individuals and their families and looking at long-term solutions for their families. After years of discussing with the ALS community and planning, our board and our staff decided that it was time to expand our existing bereavement supports as part of our commitment to people living with ALS and their family members. So prior to 2022, our organization was providing support through a bereavement letter series, a volunteer facilitated grief support group, and an annual remembrance event. We did not have any dedicated bereavement or grief support person. It was mostly being managed by care services coordinators who are understandably engaging with newly diagnosed individuals and their current caseload. Approximately 130 to 140 people living with ALS who are supported by our organization pass away each year. And this leaves many grieving family members, friends, and community members who are in search for support. In planning for the expansion of our existing bereavement program, we decided that we were going to really focus on 3 areas. The first area was ALS-specific grief support. In general, there's a lack of ongoing support from our organization for people who've lost a loved one to ALS. At that time, we realized that people really needed support from other members who had the experience of losing a loved one to ALS. We frequently hear from participants that there's really nothing like losing a loved one from ALS. And so having that opportunity to connect in with others with that unique experience is really supportive and helpful. The second area we decided to focus on was aftercare. And although many individuals living with ALS utilize hospice for end-of-life care and have some access to aftercare support, not all do. And this means that some primary bereaved do not have an aftercare support and may struggle to access the resources for accessing grief and loss support after the death of their loved one. And the third area we decided to focus on was navigating support. Both of the logistic and emotional complications of death can be complicated and really complex. Our organization at the time had limited staff bandwidth, and we really realized that we needed a dedicated person to help lead the charge. So in December of 2023, we were able to hire on our organization's first ever bereavement services coordinator. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Albert, who is our bereavement services coordinator, to speak about how she has worked to develop a foundation for this program and the really wonderful services that we have added as a result.
I'm so happy to be here today and share some of my experiences as the first bereavement support coordinator for ALS Northwest. First of all, at ALS Northwest, bereavement support services have been developed on the premise that grief following the loss of a loved one to ALS is a normal response to profound loss. We focus on helping family members develop skills moving forward with their grief and not necessarily trying to minimize or get rid of their grief. When a person with ALS dies, their ALS care coordinator makes the initial contact on behalf of ALS Northwest. An online survey was also developed to help our care coordinators make referrals. And since anticipatory grief before or at the time of diagnosis can impact people, we also accept referrals from those who are currently living with ALS. We have also set a time at our care meetings on a monthly basis to discuss referrals. Two primary ways we communicate with bereaved family members is through letters, which are delivered through the Postal Service at regular intervals throughout the first year, at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then at the end of the first year. We added email letters at the 4th month, and we provide online letters for those who prefer this method of communication. Another thing we did at the beginning of 2023 was release an online survey to those who had attended a virtual bereavement support group meeting after the death of their loved one. We were gratified to receive a 60% response rate to the survey, and it provided invaluable information, which led to the development of more in-person support groups, adding additional guest speakers to virtual support group meetings, and providing additional resource materials online and in person to program participants, and finally, the development of a quarterly newsletter. We developed an online newsletter called Navigating Grief, which goes out to those family members who have opted in to receive communication from ALS Northwest following the death of their loved one. Articles highlight self-help activities and external resources within the philosophical context of grief as a normal and natural response to profound loss, with no prescribed timeline or finish line. Readers are also encouraged to submit their own writings to share with others in this community. As I mentioned earlier, we now offer in-person support groups as well as virtual support groups, and I also provide individual meetings to care partners and other family members during the first year after the death of their loved one. The bereavement program services is based on a premise that grief is a normal response to loss, and every individual's experience is unique and valid. In this spirit, if people wish to continue to participate in support groups and personal meetings after the end of the first year, they are welcome to do so. Anticipated outcomes are focused on helping individuals access appropriate support relating to their quality of life and well-being as manifested through participation in work and or regular activities in their lives and increased social interactions and contacts within their community. The reassessment survey is to assess how expansion of our bereavement services have impacted coping and feelings of well-being among those grieving the loss of a loved one to ALS and to inform future program development. During spring of 2024, we plan to host one or more focus groups for participants to share their own experience, perceptions, and suggestions for further growth of our bereavement support program. So looking forward into this year, coming year, we've identified some next steps that we want to implement. First is reassessing the location of our in-person support groups and the timing. We've tried to identify some convenient geographic locations in the Portland metro area and surrounding suburbs, and we're going to keep working on that to find locations that maybe are a little more convenient for people in transit. And we're also looking for expanded opportunities for bereaved and individual support outside the metro area because we provide services around the state of Oregon and Southwest Washington. So lessons learned during this first year include a recognition that grief often begins at or before the diagnosis of ALS. We have learned that bereavement support doesn't necessarily end at the 12-month mark. Many of our people need support long after 12 months. And finally, for me in particular, the role of bereavement coordinator, I've had to set some pretty clear boundaries for myself and for the people I work with and walk with to explain that I am not a therapist, I am not a spiritual guide, or a personal friend. I am a support person who's here to walk the walk with people as they go through their own particular grief journeys. And so finally, understanding on a daily basis that we can't do it all, but whatever we can do will be of value to the people we connect with.
Lastly, Rebecca and I just want to thank all of you for your time and your attention and your interest in this subject. We really feel that adding bereavement support services to our programming has been a huge help to the ALS community, and we really look forward to continuing to do more. We encourage all of you who are watching to think about how you might want to implement some of these sort of strategies and some programming to your own work. And Rebecca and I are more than happy to be resources and share our experience and welcome you in reaching out anytime with questions or to share the wonderful work that you're doing in your community as well. All right, thank you so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much for that really interesting presentation, and we do have time for questions. And Marcella has a question down here in the front. We'll start with her.
Hi, Marcella from ALS Association in Colombia. Thank you for your presentation. I just have a question. Did you explore any distinctions in support services for families of people with ALS who underwent assisted dying or euthanasia compared to other cases?
That's a great question. I can certainly share that Oregon is a state that supports assisted dying. We do have a number of those individuals who join our support groups. We haven't made an exact distinction between those two groups, but it's a really interesting topic that you bring up and potentially something for us to look into in the future. Rebecca, if you want to add to that.
I would just say that, I've had the opportunity to meet with in support groups and one-on-one conversations with many people who have chosen that option. I would say that other people either don't bring it up or possibly they went a different route and they didn't use that resource that is available in our state. And again, I don't really have a sense of how that's impacting people in their particular grief journeys after the death of their loved one. But I think that it's a very interesting question.
And we do have an online question.
I've got a question here from Katharina Linder, who's at Inselspital Bern, and she's asking, who pays for this grief counseling?
Yeah, so the grief support, well, first off, we should distinguish that Rebecca does not provide counseling. She is a support service individual, so she's very clear upfront about her role. But all of our programs through our organization are at no cost to the people living with ALS and the families that we support. Our funding comes primarily from donors, fundraising events, and grants. And I'll let Rebecca speak a little bit more towards her role and the distinguishing there.
You know, I'm a person who my role with the program is to really be another person at ALS Northwest that connects with individuals who have lost someone, and in many cases they will have already told their care coordinator that they are interested in bereavement support. In some cases, they may not have said specifically that they want to talk to somebody, but I will have heard from a family member or somebody in their community that they think that they could use the support. So in those cases, I'll make a call and I will invite them to visit with me. We will talk about what supports they have. I kind of have a list of 8 or 9 things that I ask to sort of give me a sense of where they are. And I do as much listening as I do talking. So many times I would just be a person outside their immediate sphere that is doing some listening, and then I can provide some additional resources for therapists and counselors in their the area that they live in. And sometimes just giving a person a resource for a therapist or a counselor, I find out later from that person when I speak to them in a month or two that they're engaged with that therapist and that that's proving to be helpful. Some people do not prefer to see a therapist. They really just want to kind of talk to somebody who's outside their own support system or their personal family and friends and kind of hear themselves sort of talk about what they're going through and what they think the next best steps are. So I'm an active listener, but I want to emphasize that a lot of my role is listening and helping people really sort of sort through the options of where they are and what they want to do next.
And there's another question back here.
A presentation. I think it's really important. And as you were talking, I kept thinking about the Australian report around complicated grief and mitigating factors around if we provide high quality support while people are living with ALS, and we help to minimize regret, which is a core function of palliative care, we can really help set people up. And regardless of what we do, you know, the devastation of ALS is profound out of any of the other neurological diseases of losing someone. And so I think it's really important that we think about the streamlined approach. And thank you for segmenting and separating out and creating a position specifically for this. I really appreciate you and thank you for telling your story. And I think we have a lot to learn.
Yes, thank you for that question. Go ahead.
Me?
No, Cassie and Rebecca, if you had something to.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And I think this is something that we talk a lot about is how we can best support, as was mentioned in the presentation, care partners and people living with ALS while they're also living with the disease.
that sort of, whether we call it complicated grief or anticipatory grief. And I know from my own experience with a loved one that had a different terminal disease, devastating in different ways, that the grief and the bereavement oftentimes start before there really is a definitive diagnosis. And so living with a person who's experiencing this disease as a care partner or a family member is just, it's just a huge burden and challenge for any person. And so I think it is incredible that ALS Northwest decided to fund a position for this work, and I'm really honored to be the first person who's working on this with the ALS Northwest. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to meet with people and to learn so much from them.
Yeah, and you probably want to get together with those people in Australia and have a discussion. So I think that's all of our time for this discussion. Oh, there's one more online. Okay, you have 19 seconds.
Okay. Kevin Robinson from Wales asks, is there an opportunity to begin navigating bereavement prior to passing other than existing caregiver meetings or groups?
Yes, there is. We are willing and able to meet with people who are engaged in their caregiving at any point that we find out that they would like to receive support.
And I think we're excited to explore more opportunities to do that outside of our care partner support groups. And, we're coming into our second year, so we're really able to kind of dig in and really find more options for the people that we support. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to say thank you to Rebecca, Cassandra, and Cassandra's cat. And up next, please welcome the Reverend Joe Green and Judith Mintz for ALS, a unique assessment process for patients, families, and providers.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So glad to see you all here. This has been such an amazing conference so far. We learned so much yesterday. And in fact, we identified several ways in which we can tie in some of that material into what we're planning to talk about today.
And good morning from me as well. I'm Joe Green. I'm a hospice chaplain. And I'm here with my colleague Judith Mintz, who is a hospice social worker. And we work in the greater Chicago land area. Before we get started, I want to offer a special thank you to our company for supporting this project and certainly our participation in this conference. Also, a special thanks to Jumana Barodi and Peggy O'Connor and Gemma Ramos, who are with the ALS clinics that we serve in our area. We are here because we have created a tool, which I hope you have referenced there in front of you. And really a good way to describe this tool is that, and this is a monumental statement, I know you will see, but that it really brings together all the resources that we have heard today, yesterday and today at this conference, and even beyond that. But obviously it is a concise framework. It does not include all that information, but at its simplest form, you could say that it's a checklist. It's a checklist so that our clients, our patients, our staff, and the caregivers can be well prepared and ready as this disease progresses in their life and how they live with this disease. But at the forefront of this concept is that it is based on values, what's important, and then goals of care. It really was conceived to start at the end and then work back as the disease progresses and address each of these needs, goals based on what is important to these individuals on a timely basis. At the core of the theme of this workbook is this idea of discovery, and while it's a commonly used phrase, I think it's very profound. We think it's very profound that whether it be staff or patient or caregiver, those we're dealing with don't know what they don't know. And so that's what this tool accomplishes, is introduces those areas that they don't know. To quote, and with the evidence that I put forward, that really we're addressing the issues that we've talked about here. To quote Marcella Sacco in her presentation, Why Palliative Care in ALS, early care planning assures lower decision burden when aware of patient preferences. That speaks to what we're addressing here. We recognized a need. It's probably obvious to all of us here, but it's not to those that we train, those that we deal with. Those living with ALS are seeking answers to questions they have about their future. The ALS Assessment Guide offers hope. We believe strongly in that. Hope that they will be able to make choices as they determine based on what is most important to them. And so to quote this time Denise Harris in her presentation yesterday, there's more to a person than MND. Introduce this model, her model, to new clinicians, which is a very important part to us. Document wishes early with advanced care planning. There is more to a person than MND. The purpose of this guide is to anticipate disease progression and possible future challenges, clarify and identify support and resources, explore potential interventions, and consider the choices they offer, assess values, and make well-informed decisions based on identified priorities, gain insight on anticipating needs and making decisions in advance of need while the options are still available. This is very much an anticipatory approach instead of the common reactionary approach as symptoms present themselves. And so again, to quote Marcella, not only in the here and now, but also tomorrow and the days after, describe the therapeutic possibilities for the acceptance or not acceptance of any therapeutic proposal. And so in summary, it's a pathway. I mean, even when we get hospice patients, they have still not addressed many of these issues. They've been told probably a number of times. They either weren't ready or they weren't willing or they didn't see it in its clarity. And so we get that opportunity that we don't want to neglect. And so it's a pathway, a gateway to the many questions and options, again, as we've already discussed here at this conference. And so Judy's going to break down now further the guide with some of the same evidence as how it prompts the discussion that we owe those that we care for.
Okay, so I want to start by talking about the first part of this, know your support. It's important for everyone who's living with ALS to be aware of who's on their team, who's there for them. It's also important for those people on those teams to be aware of each other. So who could those potential support people be? We have a palliative care team, potentially, a hospice care team, other clinical resources, the care partners, the families, and other supports such as financial, legal, insurance, community resources, social services, and research studies and clinical trials. Yesterday, Susan Bromby talked about in her discussion Unveiling the Silent Journey that there were 14 different disciplines engaged in the care of her patient. And when you have 14 different disciplines engaged in the care of one person, the potential for conflicting information is huge. Everybody has to be on the same page with the messages that they're giving. There's also questions at that point about who's doing the heavy lifting when it comes to the difficult conversations. Is everybody kind of doing one of these in terms of who's going to bring up the potential consequences of engaging in BiPAP support, for example? Everybody has to know who's who in the picture. So then understand the disease. This, again, is very important for anticipating prognosis. Limb onset ALS presents very differently than bulbar onset ALS. There's a potential for pseudobulbar affect, which is the discrepancy between the internal emotional experience and the external affect that's describing that experience. Being prepared for that is knowing what kind of disease you're living with, knowing what the pharmacology options might be and how those might impact. It's important to understand the type of ALS that you're dealing with because, as was discussed yesterday, Nicholas Jackson talked about invest in your voice. If we don't know that we're dealing with pseudobulbar ALS, then we don't know that we need to initiate voice banking, message banking sooner in the disease process rather than later. And then identify values. What is most important to any individual person living with this illness? What's important to their family? Where are the challenges? What are the key quality of life criteria that need to be identified? And how do we describe the goals to sustain those? Early care planning lowers the decision burden for people when they know what the patient's preferences are. What if and what then? So we began this discussion, these conversations with our patients and their families from a perspective of what if. ALS does not present in the same way for every person with the disease. And the things that we're going to talk about, the items I'm going to go through, might not all manifest for every patient with ALS. But we don't know. I've had patients that could speak up until the last moment of their life. I've had patients who lost the ability to speak early in the process of the diagnosis. We've had patients that could walk up until the very end. So knowing and encouraging and supporting people's engagement in these what-if conversations allows people to attain a sense of mastery and anticipation over outcomes instead of just reacting to what shows up. Anticipated future and how to exert choice of the timing of different interventions, including death and the legality of those options. We want to make sure that we offer a sense of control in a disease process that is defined by a relentlessly progressing loss of control in many different areas. So the first area that we want to discuss is activities and interests. What's most important to this person? What's most important in their lives? What are the activities that constitute a quality of life for this individual? What are the challenges getting in the way? And what has changed that impedes those activities? So yesterday we heard from Sarah Solomon and Helen Carey, embracing risk in OT interventions. Maybe what's really important to somebody is being able to smoke. Let's make sure that we make that happen. Let's prioritize that, but we have to know it. We have to define it. Maybe we heard from Claire Radcliffe yesterday about the role of exercise in the context of a person's life. Let's know about that exercise. What's important about it for them? What kind of exercise? How can we help them do it as safely as possible, but also acknowledging the dignity of risk, that sometimes the quality of life means taking risks. There are many different choices that people might make. I had a patient once whose priority was bathing every day. That's what was important to him. And getting in place the resources for him to get the help that he needed to be able to shower daily contributed enormously to his quality of life. So mobility, what if? What if I'm gonna need assistance using my arms and legs? We need to start early in the process assessing current mobility and anticipated decline. Again, knowing the type of ALS. Assess what assistive devices are in place, assess the home's accessibility, determine the availability of equipment, and required learning curves. And this is important. What does it take to learn how to use this equipment? For example, yesterday we heard about eye gaze wheelchair driving, right? This is expensive. What are the resources? Do people have the resources to access different equipment? And what is it going to take to learn how to use it? In the United States, we have a very strict line between palliative care and hospice care, and some of this equipment is available while individuals are still enrolled in hospice care, and then is no longer available once they're enrolled in hospice care. So in palliative care, they have access to resources that may not still be available once they enroll in hospice. So anticipating this need and ensuring that, that the resources are met when they're still available. What if? What if I need assistance with my ability to speak and to communicate? We need to assess an individual's ability to access augmentative and alternative communication. This could be the internet, smartphones, computer literacy and skill, Dynavox, voice banking, speech replication, and we heard a lot yesterday from John Costello and Nicholas Jackson about significant new tools that are available. But we also learned about the complexities of accessing those tools and being able to use them effectively. The need for early investment in voice messaging and in voice banking and message banking. The improved outcomes that happen with greater professional support and guidance. Is that support and guidance available? How do we find it? Where do we go to get it? And most importantly, speech is key to identity. We find over and over again that this is a topic that people are very resistant to really invest the energy in, because it means confronting a reality, a potential reality, without the ability to speak. Not everyone is able to do that, but our role is to educate and make sure that people know what are their options, what are their choices. They may choose not to avail themselves of them because of the identity issues, the fear of this particular future coming about, the complexity of really availing oneself to the maximum possible ability of the technology that's available. But we need to make sure that people are aware and that they're making informed choices. Okay, activities of daily living. So what if I need assistance with my daily needs? We need to assess in advance the availability of support both in the current moment and as the disease progresses and the needs increase. I always say that we want to look at the adequacy of caregiving in the moment and the sustainability of it over time. Are we going to be able to keep this up? Can this family keep this up? Does this individual have resources to hire the kind of caregiving they're going to need down the road? And there are privacy concerns, right? As an individual, maybe I'm not comfortable with the idea of someone I don't know providing this kind of care to me. Or maybe as a family member, I'm uncomfortable providing this kind of care to a parent or to another family member. So assessing those privacy concerns and the availability of family resources to step in is really important in an anticipatory way. Memory, mood, and cognition. What if I experience changes in my personality? What if I experience cognitive shifts, changes in memory and reasoning ability? What if I experience emotional changes? Is my family prepared for that? Am I prepared for that? And we need to consider in advance what interventions someone might be prepared to avail themselves of if that happens. So are they prepared to consider counseling, psychotherapy, family counseling, psychoeducation resources? There are pharmaceutical interventions that may be available, possibly even memory care support. Cognitive impairment can inhibit decision-making, and it's necessary to anticipate that this might occur. The other important point about this is that conversation about what if. Well, if this happens, then these are the interventions I would be prepared to engage in. It makes it much more likely that those interventions will be accessed when the time comes, if the time comes. That pre-planning, okay, I get it. If this happens, if I start to experience memory changes or personality changes, here are the things that we as a family are going to do. Swallowing. So, a potentially life-limiting circumstance, right? So what if it becomes more difficult to swallow? What if I need to consider medically administered nutrition? Is this going to be exclusive or in combination with oral consumption, pleasure feeding, for example? What are the maintenance requirements? Is my family up for that? What are the risks of the surgery, the risks of infection? What is the timing, right? Because this intervention must be placed in advance of need in most cases, while the surgery can still be tolerated. We had a very detailed presentation yesterday from Gioia Ciani and Gary Grimaldi, the lived experiences of people with ALS and PEG tubes. Lung capacity impacts the ability to tolerate surgery. People need education about this process and its implications, and they need to be involved in the shared decision-making process and to include family and make sure that everybody's on the same page. They also need to consider, it's important to consider the possibility that at some point in the future, I might want to discontinue the use of this particular support. What would that look like? What would that mean? The emotional and spiritual, ethical consequences of deciding to discontinue the use of tube feedings are profound and not something we want to be surprised by. Also, I'd like to add there are new options for delicious pureed foods that we all got to try yesterday. And this may, in fact, impact someone's decision about what it means to potentially need pureed foods, and they might be willing to forego this particular intervention a little bit longer. So a lot of things are changing, and a lot of things are coming into play. We're learning so much here that I get to take back home. I love it. Okay.
So you only have a few seconds left, so I don't know if you want to go to your final...
I will move right through. Yes. Thank you. So breathing, also a life-limiting circumstance. What if breathing becomes more difficult? We need to consider the moral, ethical, religious implications of maintaining or discontinuing breathing assistance and life support. Okay. Consider the possibility of an unexpected terminal event. This can happen. Be aware that oxygen treatments can have unintended consequences like increased levels of carbon dioxide. But how do this conversation about the BiPAP needs to be navigated from the very beginning. And this is what Susan Brumby talked about yesterday, Unveiling the Silent Journey. How do we navigate informed consent around this BiPAP? How do we bring this conversation up at the beginning of BiPAP intervention, not at the end of the process when people are exhausted?
Could you go to your final slide, please?
Yeah. And physical and emotional exhaustion. What if I don't want to live like this anymore? Understanding rights, understanding options, and being aware of what those options might be. They're different between countries and from state to state within the United States. And I just want to add, future editions of this will have number 9. What if there's an emergency or a natural disaster, which we learned about yesterday from Jessica Mabe? We need to include that in the next edition here.
So thank you very much. Unfortunately, we do not have any time for questions, but it's a terrific guide.
Thank you.
And that leads us right into our next discussion, which will be a facilitated discussion by Sarah Solomon, who you all met yesterday. and it's called What's Keeping You Up at Night?
I do feel like I'm doing a TED Talk with my fancy microphone on. Thank you all. Thank you, Jess, for asking me to do this. I think this is a new kind of format for this day, and I think it came from having like an absolute hive mind of people that are passionate about assisting people to live with MND ALS. I've just been listening to all the talks, and I've kind of made a few notes. But I think, you know, internationally, there are so many differences in how things are navigated, differences in funding, differences in availability of multidisciplinary care. We've got geography, we've got culture. And I think, given that we live in such a multicultural society these days, even between countries, I know in Australia we are a huge multicultural society, and ensuring that we provide culturally appropriate care. But look at us all, and look at all the people online. I mean, there's 450 people, I think, attending this at the moment. Yeah, give or take, which is astonishing. And the fact that this is over 2 days now, the first MND ALS conference I ever attended in 2012 in Sydney, I think there was probably 70 allied health professionals sitting in the room, and now look at this. So it just shows how absolutely passionate we all are about this. So I think what Jess hopefully has the goal of people getting together in tables. So if you're on a table with just a few people, can you quickly just kind of merge with another table? Because I'm gonna leave you with some kind of ideas to discuss, and I want people from different countries, different regions to share the things that they are doing to assist people with motor neurone disease. Also, all the people online, we're going to have a facilitated discussion. They can apparently hear me, which is frightening. And I have been clearly told that I need to speak more slowly. Thank you, Sarah Feldman. So we have a safe word. She's going to throw something at me if I talk too fast, or if I use terrible Australian slang that you don't understand. For all of those from yesterday, a ciggy is a cigarette. Babe is pretty much what I call everybody. Mate, another word you will all know. Down the bush means going for a walk in the forest. So it's not what other people may think. So anyway, I've got some, I was going to throw in the thong, but then I thought I won't talk about wearing thongs after the footwear discussion yesterday, because clearly a thong in Australia is not what a thong in America is. So some of the things that I have maybe just given you a little bit of a prompt to be able to talk about in your tables. I've written myself a list from the talks over the last few days, and also just reflecting on the things that we've done in our clinic over the last 15 years to improve the care of working with people living with MND, despite the challenges that we know in every country that people with MND ALS do not fit into the funding models. In Australia, they don't fit into the funding models. We've just heard in America, between what you guys call hospice and palliative care, they don't fit into the funding. So what have we done to make these people be able to live their life within the limitations? We talk about geography. In Australia, everybody lives around the edge. Few people in the middle, a very big desert in the middle. How do we get a hospital bed or an electric bed to someone like my mum who lived 4 hours from a city? Those kind of things. Like, what do we do? What are we all doing? Because we're all doing these things. Anyway, here are my slightly rogue bullet points. Bereavement. When I was sitting there listening to ALS Northwest, I was thinking, that's exactly right. Now, just to let you know that I was already working in the MND space when my mum was diagnosed. I don't work in this reason because of her. I'd worked in the area for 5 years before she was diagnosed. And I think that idea of bereavement, that as a daughter, like living in the moment, there was no bereavement going on for me. I was just like, let's keep mum at home. I was holding the space. And that idea of bereavement, like later down the track, for me would have been perfect. So I think that's something, as organisations, beautiful to think about. Equipment needs, the strategy, the phenotype, how do you fit them in? Like, how do you dance the dance with someone who you know may need a wheelchair, but is not ready to talk about it yet? Things about communication, the care team, all these people involved. How do you communicate? How does the person not have to be responsible for explaining to every single person that visits their house who else is involved? What do we do as a team to do that? Funding gaps, geography, culture, client-centred care. What does that actually mean? Care planning, again, huge depending on where you live. Ooh, where you live and your culture and different, legislation in government about, your choices about dying or living or advanced care planning. They were kind of my things. Anyway, so you have 15 minutes as tables to kind of maybe talk through and share ideas that you've done with in your area, in your country, in your region around what. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I did say that they needed to, stop me being rogue. Anyway, 10 minutes together, and then we'll come back, and each table is going to give a little 1-minute spiel on what they have kind of come up with. So you're going to not listen to me for 5 minutes, and I think that you might need to turn my microphone off. No. I'll go over the bullet point one more time. So, bereavement, post the idea, post kind of the catastrophic event, equipment needs, psychological needs, communication, written, bereavement, equipment, psychological support, communication, and how do we ensure that people know who are doing what? Geography, culture, demographics, being culturally responsive given the multicultural scenario that we live in. Client-centred care, what does that mean? Care planning, and dancing the dance. So just to be clear, the idea is that we want to hear from you guys about what's keeping you up at night. Where are the gaps? How as we, as an international consortium of people who are passionate about helping people live with MND, can fill the gaps? just giving everybody a 2-minute warning. I'm absolutely loving the fact that there is an absolute hive of discussion going on. After the 2 minutes, each table will need to nominate just one person to maybe give a little quick summary of what was keeping you up at night and what solutions you maybe are thinking about. Jess is going to come around with the microphone. So nominate your person now.
Maybe so that it's quite balanced and that.
I'll go.
One, and then okay, him to do that side too. Yeah.
All right, Jess is coming over to the first table. She's head left. My left. Nope, she's going right. My right. She's going rogue. I'm normally the one that goes rogue. All right, so if everybody would like to wrap up their discussions, Jess is heading to the first table to hear about what keeps them up at night and what sort of solutions or ideas they've been discussing to let them sleep better.
Well, overall, we...
All right, everybody. I love that you're all talking. But... All right.
We found that there's a lot that keeps us up at night. We are from Switzerland, Sweden, the United States, and Iceland, so I had a really lovely discussion surrounding kind of the differences, particularly in terms of funding, access to equipment, insurance, and how variable that is across the international kind of sphere, and really just wanting to be able to make sure that that support is consistent so that no person living with ALS or MND feels as though, you know, they have to make compromises based on where they live or what services and insurance are available to them.
I suspect this will be a common theme. All right, we're going right. Left, my left, back table. All right, you got to nominate one person.
So sorry for that. Is we just couldn't finish the round to tell each other who we are and how we are working. I cannot bring any results. Sorry for that.
Well, at least you've made some international connections.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
All right, okay. Hello. We are from Sweden and Iceland in our table, both health professionals and patients. We talked mostly about the timing of giving information, and we feel like it's hard to find that timing because sometimes the patients are not, they don't want to hear. We also, they get frightened.
The dancing the dance?
Yes, exactly. But also some people feel like they're getting the information too late. So that was our discussion.
That is really, really pertinent discussion, I think. All right, we're going my left.
Hi, everybody. We had Ireland, Belgium, and the U.S. at our table, and we also had a hard time. We need an hour.
Yes.
Next time.
I think this was a pilot
Planning
session.
committee. Yeah. We talked about sharing information to other healthcare professionals, right? Educating our healthcare community about ALS, MND, so that when we make referrals, we have trusted people in the community we can that can care for the patients that we work with. the variations of services in different countries, especially throughout Europe and neighboring countries, and in the U.S., the varying resources in different states. And managing the variety of experiences, the condition of ALS, the progression, as we've heard over and over again, it's so different. And so how do you as a healthcare professional address and acknowledge that? And you're kind of constantly adapting and adjusting. But the biggest one that keeps us all up at night is the people that we don't know about that need all of our services.
Oh, amazing. I think that is something I know that I've taught occasionally in Victoria. There are people that just fall through the cracks, and how do we catch them before they fall? All right, going my right.
A little bit the same as was just mentioned there around individuals and how much support they've got and how variable that is depending on where you live. We call it a postcode lottery in the UK. I guess it's a zip code lottery in the US. And it's that when somebody's newly diagnosed, our plan is to bring them back 3 months back to a consultant clinic or to a nurse-led clinic. What happens in that 3 months, and I guess what's keeping us up maybe, is there additional support that's required during that first 3 months following a diagnosis, thinking about the things that we've discussed this morning, just this morning, around grief and bereavement and loss and reaction to diagnosis. So I guess that's our summary.
I love that. How do we hold their space in that time?
Thanks.
Going left.
Hi, we had a small table and a quick conversation. Unfortunately, most of this table is from industry, so we don't have a hands-on experience as much as our two colleagues at the table, but we discussed a lot about the inequality and the challenges of getting funding and materials and services, no matter where you are, where you're based or where you are in your disease progression. And we also discussed what we all thought would keep us up at night, is being a palliative care nurse. But one of our table members is actually a palliative care nurse, and she finds it very rewarding. So she's lucky she sleeps well, and we compliment her on her wonderful work.
Amazing. I always say there's a certain personality of people that love working in this space. Left,
Hi,
right.
everybody. So our table is comprised of people from North America, and I think, as you mentioned, there is definitely a theme amongst all of the responses so far. We really focused on providing multidisciplinary care to patients that live in rural areas, not just within the United States, but also within Canada as well, and making sure we don't lose people that fall through the cracks. And so some solutions have been, like UCSF is developing satellite clinics within California. The Netherlands has a mobile van that can provide multidisciplinary care to areas where there's not. And just being able to provide telehealth services across state lines, but also across geographical borders, and being able to provide that care, across countries as well.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember before COVID, telehealth we were doing a little bit in our clinic because we cover a whole state, but it was very clunky and it was not very well organised. And I think, if I can say this loosely, one of the benefits that came out of COVID was the ability to video conference better, to allow a bit more access for those people living in remote communities around being able to access healthcare in a different way. I must admit, trying to set up an eye gaze for someone over video conference was pretty hard, but we had to do it. All right, we're going left. Oh, it's Joe.
Thank you. Yes, hello, everybody. We had people from Ireland, from South Africa and Australia on our table, and we were trying to find what kept us up at night as a collective, and that was actually really, really hard. So I think the range of different things that we talked about was Ireland, we were talking about access to rigs and the timing, and that kind of issue is really quite stressful. We talked about inequity of resources, or lack of resources, I think, from in the South Africa instance as well. So I think, yeah, inequity of resources, I think for me is the biggest one in so many ways, depending on your age, depending on where you live, regional, rural, metro, it's just a real mixed bag.
That seems to be a multicultural or multi-country theme, the postcode lottery. Where do you live? How old you are? I've lost
sorry.
With the light. Oh, yeah.
Hello. So at our table, we had people from Iceland, the UK, and the US. And to be honest, we spent most of the time getting to know each other and the differences within our services. I think in the UK, in Cambridge, we are a small area, but we see a large number of patients compared with the team in Iceland who have a big area and a smaller number of patients. But then we sort of realised that actually that team is not just seeing patients with ALS, MND, so they are having to prioritise things, and their time is precious with these patients, whereas in Cambridge, that's all we see. We only see people with ALS. So for us, it was sort of that prioritization and being pulled in different directions, no matter, how big our caseloads were and how they differed. So that was probably what we were talking about.
Amazing. Going left.
Our table was from Geneva, Australia, US and Belgium. We had OTs, nurses, physio, two people from funding charities and one genetic counsellor. We talked a lot. I think we started off with the funding issues, the enormous gaps that everyone, I think, has actually already addressed. We moved on to bereavement funding, and we talked about a study in Australia that was funding psychological support for the children of people with MND, and how that has funded just 10 families. I think it's a pilot for 1 year, but it's been really well accepted. And then we kind of had a general discussion about difficult conversations, because they are connected to every section. So whether it be care planning or end of life, or the funding, or the respiratory, like Sarah Brumby's conversation, we talked about the fact that those conversations are happening all the time, and so it depends where the person is in time and who they're asking in time, and how that varies according to who that professional is. So you can get a different response at a different point in time. And I likened it to the movie Howl's Moving Castle, which, if you don't know what it is, it's a bit difficult, but it's like a castle that has legs and gets up and moves and lands in a different place. When you open the door, you exit into a completely different place. And when I see people come back each 3 months, everything is shifting. So the conversation shifts and the people shift, and the health professional has to read the room. And then the last thing we talked about was the fact that it's not just one person in the room. So you've got a partner and child or whoever is, and you have different agendas. So reading the conversation and adapting on the spot to wherever the council has landed is challenging, and because each profession has a different vision, we're all going to see it from a different viewpoint. I think that sums it up.
Definitely brings into those themes of communication and ensuring that the team is communicating the same things to someone, non-biased. But that idea that I found during COVID, when we were doing lots of things by video conference, that it was difficult to read the room when you're just looking at a head on a screen, that real kind of things that you see when someone walks into clinic, that we were losing that a little bit. So despite the benefits of video conferencing allowing people to access medical care or allied health recommendations, we lost that interpersonal, being able to read the room, see the non-verbal things that were going on. Jess is up the back.
Yeah, so we had a group from the United States, from the Netherlands, Switzerland, Denmark, and of course I live on the internet, so a bit of everywhere really.
You're actually an AI bot, are you? Yeah.
As an AI model, I can't really answer that question because my data only goes up to January.
My avatar, yes.
So we talked about something slightly different, which is access to disease-modifying therapies. And I know we are predominantly talking about a lot of the supportive things that people do, but clearly it would help if we had more time. You know, so much of what we're managing is rapid change over time. And what is, always comes to the fore when you speak to colleagues from other countries is the latitude lottery. Why is it that I can, juggle the 5 available FDA-approved treatments in the United States, the 2 in the UK, the 2 in some of the other richest countries in the OECD, and it really is disturbing, I think, for people increasingly connected, sort of seeing that there are these disparities here. So particularly when so many participants in trials from countries have been parts of the studies that got these therapies approved, they or then the people that follow them unfortunately can't get access to them. So I feel like there's perhaps more of a global movement that needs to understand access to these therapies, because if we've got 5 drugs in one country and management of pseudobulbar can be pharmacological in one country and has to be different in other countries, it's going to be very difficult for us to sort of globalize our standards of care. So I feel like that sort of access is increasingly becoming a priority, and also so much of the hope that we give to people to say, well, look, there's therapies coming down the line and there are these interesting trial results, is meaningless.
Because they're not available to you.
Not available to you. I mean, I don't know how many you have in Australia, but I'll guess it's 2 as well, right?
3 maybe, yeah.
3 maybe, yeah.
Very strict criteria.
Absolutely. So I feel like, as a global group, that's something that we really have to address if we're to make care match our hope and our opportunities.
Oh, I love that. I don't love that, but I love that you're talking about that. Now, we are meant to finish at 10. Oh, no, I'm getting the okay. We've got a few more tables. Nick. My lovely colleague Nick. This is my table of my people over here.
Oh, it's me apparently.
Ah, yay.
The only non-native speaker. Hi, we are here at the table with UK, Belgium, and Australia, well represented. The topic we fell upon immediately was, by chance, something that happens as well in Belgium as in Australia and definitely keeps us up at night, and that's the discrepancy in age and the support you are given in regards to that, and that there is a huge difference and people really do fall in the cracks of the system, and that we as allied health professionals and organizations try to solve these problems as well as possible within the measures of possibilities. But it's not always easy. So it's very, very frustrating, especially for the people who live with it, of course. But also since, as health professionals, we always try to hand in solutions, and the system doesn't always help us in it. I think it adds on what has already been said. But what I think is beautifully said over there somewhere was that maybe it's not as much the people who do find their way towards us, who we can help, possibly, but maybe the worst thing is the people who don't find their way towards us and are lost in the system. So maybe that's a very good focus.
I love that.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, well, in Australia, there is a very clear divide between if you are under 65 or over 65 in terms of the availability of resources. And our peak body, M&D Australia, and all of the state M&D associations have been campaigning relentlessly for that to be more equitable and have done lots of things to try and help that. But I think that's a theme as well.
I just didn't want you to take my time.
No, I'm not. See, I've been told I'm not allowed to talk too much.
So the table's essentially Denmark, and we are in Miami and United States, and a local person as well. The theme is the same, but the position is different. Denmark has a very homogeneous population, and you get resources and insurance. And the overall theme is they have the limitations of the treatments and the clinical trials. So what do you do when you don't have those resources? In our center, we kind of have the opposite. We have a very international center. We have all the treatment available. Not only that, we have multiple clinical trials. We actually have several expanded access programs, another concept that is opportunity to get something that is in there. So you can have all 6 medications, participate in a clinical trial, or we put you in expanded access program. But at the same time, we have international communities which they don't have the monies, they cannot get to the resources. And so we have this, for us, is the problem. And they worry about where they're going to send the patients for a clinical trial or how they can get these medications. For us, is we have it all, but half of the patients that come to us get it all, and half of the patients, we don't know what to do with it.
Wow.
So we have this, we call it, medical miracles, the SOD1 story. Some of the medications that personally, when we combine all of them, our patients are doing very well when they have all the medications. And these, ethical nightmares in which I can give it to you, but you get nothing. So that's sort of the big problem. And I think our group has the two sides of the same problem, and we saw from different angles.
Yeah, that inequity in all sorts of things, whether it be care, equipment, trials. We've got a couple of online discussion points.
Yep, they were actually repeating a lot of what was said at the other tables. So that they're providing good service according to the families they're helping, but they worry about the timely provision of wheelchairs and other equipment and so on. And they feel that their services are clinging on by threads at times, and equitable access, of course, is a problem, especially with palliative care, because eligibility is not uniform among even the same country, and it does depend what country you're in, even if you can get equipment. Everyone's trying their best, but it's also a challenge is the personal exhaustion and emotional exhaustion that comes from doing your best. They commented that a good multidisciplinary team and support network, of course, is essential.
All right, we've probably got time. I apologise if we miss any tables on it.
When I come up, that's when you start.
Go 10 minutes.
All right.
Flash through.
In front.
You watch me.
Okay, we had people from the US, speech therapists and pathologists. We have Matthew and Paula from Canada. Paula is a patient with ALS with familial LAS SOD1. I'm from Colombia, and August from Switzerland. We talked very similar about the gray areas and everything. We're not going to add to that. But the first thing we talk is about implementing new technologies that we have seen in this meeting and how comfortable are patients with this technology. We don't really know if we are actually going to overwhelm them with this. So we need their feedback. August says something important is if they don't know, I don't know what I don't know. That concept just kept ringing on our ears. Then I asked Paula, do you feel more, since her dad, her story, her dad had ALS, and now that you know this, do you feel a better future for you? And she said, there's a potential to have a better quality of life, but will there be universal access for everybody? So besides fighting against ALS MND, we are faced to fighting the system.
All right.
Hi. We have our table was from America, from the United States, from Switzerland, and from Canada. We have nurses, social work, chaplain, and physician researcher. And we talked about we kind of focused on what are our priorities in bereavement, finding opportunities through the pandemic to elicit some online support for people, and then the differences between availability and access to resources between the different countries, and how coherent it is, how in other areas it's not, and finding universal access or continuous access, and also The other thing we kind of talked about is the difference between palliative and hospice in the United States, and how that strict line and that transfer from palliative to hospice has built into it a loss of provider relationships. So when people move from palliative to hospice, they have to make a decision to move away from the providers that they may have been working with for years and to a new team of providers that they have to get to know and to trust. So those are some of the concerns that we identified.
All right, we've got a couple more tables. Go on, Susan.
Thanks. Our table spoke about us as a collective not having enough support in the mental health space, and I think that was really evident since COVID across the globe. And in that mental health space, you know, going through the diagnostic process, diagnosis, the time after, and then the bereavement time as well. But also, how do we look at training and educating those who are diagnosed, their friends, their families, and even the therapist around coping skills and those very vital skills that they could potentially have and utilise themselves without having to rely on the health professionals all the time. As well as Melinda touched on, how do we look at upskilling and training the up-and-coming allied health professionals in the area, in this space? We're obviously a team of people who are very passionate about what we do, and we have found our way here through different journeys. But we are also facing a generation, new therapists who are very tech-savvy. They were locked off during COVID doing online education through their universities, and I would assume they're struggling to learn the communication skills face-to-face with people. So.
Brilliant. Got maybe 2 more tables.
Okay. I can be brief. Our table represented UK, Denmark, Switzerland, and the United States. And we echoed the concerns of our colleagues from Sweden and Iceland across the room regarding customizing the timing and content of education provision and to the needs and preferences of the person served and their families, while ensuring that we're providing proactive and anticipatory guidance to these families so that there are no surprises in the journey. And we underscored the importance of establishing trust between the care team and the persons and families served as a means to help with that balance and conflict.
Hi, our table is from the US, and I would say most people are on the genetics side, and I'm an SLP, so we ended up talking about AAC stuff, and we were just getting to know each other. So I think we just touched upon the issue of some barriers to AAC for patients and families, and how a lot of that can just be internal, and some of it can be generational, and it's very complex. But we just talked about some of those issues. And I just want to say that I love your analogy of the house, moving castle. Having seen that movie, it really brings to mind just what a confusing process it is for patients and families.
Thank you.
Augmentative and alternative communication. Okay, sorry.
I think that is all the tables. Oh, one more. No? Well, thank you very much for participating in this sort of robust discussion. And I know we could probably talk all day about the things that are keeping us up at night. I think the overwhelming theme that I've heard is that we are so passionate about filling those gaps, the gaps in funding, the gaps in care provision, the not letting people fall through the cracks. And, for me, it is such an immense privilege to not only be involved with the many people that I assist every day, but to be here with all of you. we've come a long way. And I just look back in the 15 years that I've been working with people living with MND ALS, and I am so, so happy that despite the gaps that we are seeing, there are just all of us pushing really hard to ensure that the people that we are assisting are not let down by the systems that we live in, that are, you know, run by different governments. In Australia, we've got government change, legislation change. I'm sure that's the same in all countries. But despite all of that, we continue to just keep forging forward to ensure the best quality of life. And I will continue to make smoking aids and drinking aids until I retire. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for speaking relatively
very slowly.
Oh, very slowly for her. Sorry. Yes. No, I also found this to be an absolutely fascinating discussion. I took lots of notes to take back, as I'm sure many, many of you did as well. Thank you so much, everyone here, for being willing to be participatory as well. And apparently we need 5 more minutes so that at the initial stage, so people can get past the who are you and where are you from?
We'll take note for next year.
And again, hopefully now you've made some new friends that you'll leave here with. That concludes the morning session. I know you're all excited about that. It's now break time, so there will be coffee out in the foyer as usual, coffee, tea. I would ask that all the Australians in the room please come up front. They'd like to get a group photo.